Hello. Hello, all the lovers out there. Lovers. Our latest BBXX swag. Today, we are going to be joined by, here we go, Hani, some Gashtrays. Let's see, it shows me how to wave to you. And Hani, there's a place where you request to join the live, and then I'll let you in. We are going to be talking about all the amazing artwork, the intimate artwork that Hani from Gashtrays, talking a bit about creativity, sexuality, the relationship between those two things, how to use art as a therapeutic tool for better understanding your relationship with your body. Hello.
Hey!
What's up?
How's it going?
It's going great. How about you?
I'm fine. I'll let you keep talking your spiel.
Well, I was just telling everybody that today we'll be talking about the awesome work you do and a bit about our event, but mostly I want to use this as an opportunity for people to get to know you as Hani and, you know, what has brought you to where you are today doing this amazing work. And for everybody at BBXX, if you're not familiar with Gashtrays, take a look at Hani's profile. It's amazing. It's good stuff. We're going to be doing a really, really exciting, tintillating event partnership coming up with a kind of get your hands dirty, dirty minds, dirty hands, clean conscience, processing your own relationship with your body through creating a sculpture of it. And so I'll talk more about the event. I don't want to spill all the beans yet, but it's going to be amazing. And we're getting ready to launch that. So everybody should be sure to come to that to check it out. But yeah, this is to get to know you and to get, give everybody else an opportunity to better get to know you. So I would love, just to start out for people who might be tuning in from BBXX who aren't familiar with you, I would love to have you first describe what you do in your own words.
Okay, well, hi, I'm Hani, and I run Gashtrays, which is a sex and body positive ceramics line. So I use my sculptures and my platform to discuss topics of sex education and period poverty and body positivity. And yeah, for me, it's just been sculpting very candidly, and it's just led to this like sex positive world, and just snowballed.
And how would you, what's the story of how you came to where you are today doing this work?
It's not the most noble story. I just started with a ridiculous pun, the word Gashtrays.
Oh, yes. Could you explain the word Gashtrays? Because in the United States, it doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
It means ashtray with a G in front of it.
Yeah. So in the UK, gash is like a disgusting slang word for vagina. Most common, I don't know, you've probably got a US version actually, used a lot in the In-Betweeners, which was like, you've got a US version of that, I believe, but just really used by like teenagers, and it's just shitty slang basically. But yeah, and then so I love a pun. I love a dirty pun. And so whilst trying to think of how to make a birthday present for a friend of mine who was a heavy smoker, I was like, wait a minute, Gashtrays? Genius. £1 million idea. And
$1 million idea.
And then I did that, and I just foolishly like put it on Instagram, and was shocked by the amount of people that wanted their own and liked the name. And it's so funny how much the name is a selling point to a lot of Brits especially, but I love that it's lost in translation to many people. I quite like that. but yeah, so just playing with the absurdity of these bizarre words that we use to describe vaginas or vulvas or whatever. We've got so many in the UK, like minge, like all these awful, like
And they're
very,
all different. That's so funny.
so strange. But I think we have far fewer descriptive words like that for penises, which I think is quite interesting. I'm going to do.
I could do an entire talk just on
Yeah,
language.
yeah.
I am a language and communication nerd. For people
Really.
tuning in, we've got all kinds of amazing interviews on our podcast that go a bit into, it's all about kind of the relationship between culture and language and how that shapes the way we think and therefore
Yeah.
the conversations we have because of the way we're thinking, or even the words that we have to serve us in those conversations, which in turn shapes all of our behaviors and reinforces the culture that we're all a part of and help creating. And can admit that is very unhealthy, but the bad news is that we're a part of it. The good news is if we're a part of it, we can change it. And so when it comes to language, you know, in the US at least, there is not, you know, a positive slang word for vulva or vagina. All of them are negative words, you know. Oh, I don't even know if I'm allowed to say it. You could be like, stop being a cunt. You're such a pussy. You know, all of these things, they're bad words. They're insulting. And so it's like, even if you're not one who uses those words, you're hearing them. And there is no chance that you can spend your whole life with that association, cultural association of a part of your body with something negative, that is going to shape the way that you think about it. Not to mention all the just even more pornographic and negative things that essentially, you know, make fun of and are being used actually to refer to that part of your body versus refer to something else. And then sometimes you'll have these other words for, you know, penis or whatever that might be positive and negative, but there's actually a word in Spanish, but it's only in Chile. I spent 2 years living in Chile, and they say la zorra, and that is fox in Spanish, which I love because it's kind of like foxy, and it's only a good thing. You'd be like, oh, la zorra, like that's amazing. In other places, it's in other countries, Latin America, it's actually a very foul word, but there it's like, that's amazing, that's the best.
Yeah.
And there's no negative connotation for it. So I've always wanted a t-shirt that has like a little foxy fox.
Right.
And it says like la zorra. And people, the translation would be lost like Gashtrays. But
That's
I mean,
brilliant.
the words that we're using shape our thoughts and vice versa. And so, I myself was part of this. And this is why BBX Sex is so much about culture, realizing, wow, my whole life, I have subconsciously been influenced in such a negative way because people think, oh, if we don't talk about this, you know, parents, for example, if we don't talk to our children and give them this information, I don't know how to talk to them. Like, it'll just be neutral. They think, oh, they just won't have that information. But no, culture will fill in all those gaps with inaccurate information, with unhealthy information. You know, culture is powerful and it's not in the right hands.
Yeah.
And so I love what you're doing, you know, it's taking something and making it ironic and taking that same negative thing and kind of flipping it over on its head. And I always love humor as a good way to go about change.
Oh, it's definitely like a fine line. Like some people really drive with sarcasm and irony, but there are
some people hate it.
They're just like, yeah, gosh, yeah. But it's like in the gay community, for example, like so much language has been used to oppress gay people, like words like queer or queen, and it's been such a journey of reclaiming that language. And I think, when done right, it can be powerful.
And it is hard sometimes. You know, it is hard. I know certain words in English that some people do that and that I still can't find myself relating to, or because of what it still stands for. In certain circles, it's been reclaimed and positive, but in the vast majority of circles, it's not. And so, you know, it is difficult, but So you created this first gas tray, as a joke. And you said, I was so surprised when I posted it and there was this great reception to it. I don't feel surprised though, because I just feel like it says how much people needed something like this, how much people needed an outlet. So would you tell us a bit about kind of what the response was to that
Yeah.
first gas tray?
Well, I did it. The first one I made in 2014. I think there's been like a major um, shift now. There's so much like vulva positivity, and representation's been a lot better since. But I remember at the time people found it to be very provocative, and I personally don't find I don't think I'm quite a very provocative person. But that's probably just because the house I was raised in, my family and everything. But yeah, you're right. You're right. There was a desire for it at the time. People were shocked to see that kind of thing. Just um, the idea of um, just visualizing a vulva outside of sexual context, just day to day, having it just in your home was shocking to a lot of people, and that in itself was such an interesting reaction, something that I really grasped onto. Like, this is clearly a deep thing for a lot of people. Why are we so shocked by seeing this body part that 50% of the population carry around with them every day? Like, and so from that I did a bit of research, and it's like, I'm so bad at retaining statistics, but it's like there's like a shocking percentage of women who've never even looked at their own vulva.
Yeah, it's a majority. It's something like that. It's wild.
Yeah. And 60% of British people with a vulva cannot properly annotate, what's the word? Label one. They don't know what goes where and what does what. And 60%. And that was so shocking to me, because we're supposed to have been taught this stuff, right? We're supposed to have gone through this in school. We had one lesson, they tick the box, we go, yeah, we know what that does. But it should be a continuous conversation. It shouldn't be just ticking a box one day when you're 13. You're never going to remember that. And I just think it's a real crying shame. So I just saw that there was power in representing this body part. It was starting conversations, whether people disagreed with it, whether people agreed with it. It was that conversation that was so interesting and valuable to me. So yeah.
I find that, everybody is often nervous to start these types of conversations. And they think they're the only one with these questions or these problems or these concerns, or questions. And all it takes is starting the conversation, because everybody, and I always tell people, you're not one of everybody. You're one, or you're not like the only person. You're the one of everyone who is waiting to have this conversation. And it's crazy how when you just create the space for it, everybody opens up. It's like people are exploding, waiting to talk about these things. And everybody sits there thinking, I'm the only one, or no one wants to talk about this. And the problem is there are no spaces. But once you create them, the magic, it's incredible to see how many people need, want, and are just craving to have these conversations and be parts of these spaces. And so I love how that, just kind of proves wrong this theory that we're the only one, or that people aren't, all the same in the end. And I think one of the most important lessons is that, you're not alone. You're not the only one, in creating that community behind these types of movements. And you mentioned this kind of making it an everyday thing, or taking it out of the sexualized place. And what I love, what came to mind is that, you're creating these everyday items that you can put up on your wall. Somebody might come over, they might see this gas tray or this tile up on the wall, or this flower vase, and in a way it's kind of this everyday thing, because it should be something we're used to, and it shouldn't be this crazy or unknown or hidden away thing. And so in a way, normalizing it and making it something more casual. But at the same time, this balance, what I love about your art is that it's also art. And so you're creating like this beauty and almost this celebration and making something special of it. And so that combination of like, this is approachable, this is casual, these are our bodies. Like this is an everyday, 50% of the population, like you said, walks around with this every day. And so making that approachable yet, celebrated, artistic and beautiful representation of it.
Thank you. That's so nice.
I think it's a great balance. So you mentioned the house that you grew up in and your family and how that's been a part of this. I'd love to hear a bit more about that.
Well, I wish you could meet them. They're a cool bunch. It's just been there's just been never any shyness around nudity ever. My dad is always naked still. He's always like trying to trick us and like putting his bollocks on the table and just being like he finds his body so funny. And when you can be so candid like that, I'm just like, that's the thing. Like I am shocked by people's reactions, and I am shocked that people find it so provocative or take it in a sexual way, because to me the body has just always been so hilarious and fascinating. It's just so fascinating to me. And also with my mum, who in 2017 had a double mastectomy after she got breast cancer. That was another turning point in our family of openness and being just aware of each other's bodies. And I really worked with her while she was going through this, because obviously that's quite a big change when you look at yourself in the mirror, to have that change. And she was a lingerie model when she was younger, so I imagine that must have been very challenging for her. But since then we've just spoken so openly. Like she gets her scars out all the time now. Of course it's a process, but she's really just like jumped into this new phase of her life. She's proud of her scars now, and just that positivity around your body, and not the idea that you're less or even comparing yourself to anyone else. It was more just celebrating her scars and the beauty of these scars as well, like the beauty and the uniqueness. Like it's so difficult to, I think it's quite difficult to explain, because I'm sure a lot of people will, like when we do the self-portrait workshops, for example, a lot of people will look at themselves and consider these wrinkles or this mole to be a flaw. But I guess my family has helped me to see that these aren't flaws. These are like your fingerprints, these are unique.
I was literally just thinking of fingerprints, because I was like, how do people think, if up to your fingers have this unique pattern that nobody else in the world, how do you think any other part of your body, let alone, the most complex and most unique part of you, is going to look like somebody else's?
And it's just the body's just always been so fascinating to me, and like in a really funny way. We're just weird little bags of goo and I enjoy that.
That part about scars and appreciating your own scars and seeing the beauty in them, and whether they're physical scars, emotional scars, we all have scars, and they're such an important part of defining and have shaped who we are. And there's this concept I love from this woman, Nadia Bolz-Weber, who wrote this book called Shameless. And we actually have a podcast episode coming out with her soon. And she talks about how, without scars, we don't have texture. There's nothing to hold on to. There's no story behind us, and the scars give us that, not only help people understand who we actually are and those experiences that have shaped us, but, give people something to grasp onto, to get to know you, to actually be there with you and give us texture.
That's it. That's like, so nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that sounds like an incredible and, a unique, at least for most people, experience that you had growing up, and the hilarity of the human body, the kind of humor and entertainment behind that. It reminded me, one of my best friends who actually lives in the UK now, she talks about how, I remember I was once interviewing her for something for BBXX, and she said, I mean, all sex is you're just taking your parts, and and she literally did this movement. She's like, and you're shoving them inside of each other, At some point, then you've got like fluids that you're putting in there. Like, sex can get weird. It's got to be funny. If you don't think sex is funny, like, you are doing it wrong.
Yeah.
So I totally love that part about needing to incorporate the humor into things.
Like, how do you feel about, I wonder if this is what your American term is for this. Queef. Do you know what queef is?
I do.
Do you laugh at a queef?
I mean, when I hear the word, I definitely laugh. It's
But
just
in
like
the moment, if there's
the
a funny
absurdity of it. I think all of these things you have to, have humor, whether it's talking about it, but at the same time, making sure the humor is positive humor and acceptance.
Yeah.
That it is, threaded with acceptance rather than rejection or, condescending tone. Because I think a lot of times this stuff is used in a humorous sense, and people, in culture will laugh or be like, oh, the way this looks or this feels or that sounds, what happened. And the humor is coming from insecurity. There's one type of humor that comes from insecurity and being afraid you don't fit in. So trying to bring other people down to make sure you feel better about yourself because you are insecure. And there's a type of humor that comes from like, shit's weird. We're all weird. We're bags of goo. And like, this is awkward, but I don't give a shit and I'm having fun. And I know who I am. And I feel good about who I am and very secure about who I am. And this is a space where I can laugh, you can laugh, and we can actually create intimacy through that humor and the connection that honesty, acceptance, and security creates. And that is magic.
That's the place.
That's the good stuff. That's the place.
Yeah. It's really just leaning into your insecurities, I find. Like, that whole thing of like being self-deprecating or whatever, and you make yourself the punchline before anyone else can. That kind of method. I guess maybe that's what I've done here, but
like you lean into them so far that you can kind of meet yourself halfway.
Exactly. That I love it now. And also just you've got to know that everybody else has these insecurities. Everybody else has these
100%,
feelings.
100%.
And it takes a lot to say it out loud. It takes a lot to admit that. And it's not for everyone, but it can really plant a seed in people, and getting them to think, oh, she said it. Maybe it's okay that I've got it, whatever.
Starting that conversation.
Yeah.
Exactly. Opening it up. I think that's key. It's funny. Something that came to mind is a long time ago, I took a class on accents. And the way that you learn an accent is you go all the way. Like the strongest version, the most extreme version of that accent is the easiest to learn. And then you tone it back and you learn to refine it. And that's where you can really like lean into and master the everyday real version of that accent. And so it kind of reminded me of that, you just go in all the way, you almost make it comical, right? You make it big, you make it extreme, you just force yourself. It's hard to crawl out of your comfort zone. You just jump and then you might, walk back to where you feel comfortable and where you can kind of get your legs back.
That's cool. Why were you learning an accent thing?
I took a class in college and it was just fun. I love that kind of stuff. I've dabbled in many random things and I love, accents in general. Let's see, what was I going to say? So as you started to kind of open this conversation for people, right? It started as a joke. It started to become something else. What have been some of the most important and impactful things that you have seen this space bring to people or that they have found in this space for themselves?
Well, the first thing that came to mind, from a more selfish point of view, it's really educated myself. Like, I hadn't intended for this to be an educational platform, or for it to even be sex positive to begin with. It had really just been the pun. And then as it snowballed, I started to educate myself in these things. And it has been such a learning experience. Really just from the community, especially just like being involved in that community, has opened me up to so many different perspectives. And it's just been a complete re-education. I learned about consent through doing this, like way later in life, when I should have learned a lot earlier. But that was the big learning curve for me. A lot about identity, gender identity, sexuality, and these were all massive revelations for me. And that all came from literally just being able to talk to people about it, and the community itself was so arms open wide, like accepting of everyone and everyone's story. And that's what I love today, is like people just comfortable enough to like confide in me and share their stories with me, and that's been brilliant. But I think for an original question, I think just I don't want to take not taking credit for this, because this is all from like the vulva positivity movement as well, but I think a massive thing that has come from this is looking at yourself more. Like, I don't think that people really take the time to look at their own genitals or their vulvas, and in a non-sexual context as well. But just that's so important for so many reasons, because one, it's important you look at yourself. So from a health point of view, you know what is your baseline, what is normal for you. So if things change, then you know what's changing and what is your normal. And from another point of view, just seeing how you work, looking at yourself. Like, people don't grab a mirror. People just, they don't do it. But I think the vulva positivity movement has really encouraged people to do that, and to just inspect their bodies a little bit more, with a lot more love, not in a critical light, just observational kind of tone. I think that's so important. Because were you ever taught to do that when you were younger?
Yeah. The reason that I started BBXX, says no. I don't think it was taught anything.
Exactly. This community, like all these organizations, yourself included, it's driven by people who have not had the right education and trying to make sure that nobody else is raised like that.
I always joke that I'm like, I didn't start BBXX because I know everything and had a great family and knew what healthy relationships looked like and, knew all these things. It was because I got to this point where I woke up and realized I had been totally, lied to by culture and the things I believed and the things I had seen, and just knew nothing, or the things that I did know were all wrong, and woke up to this opportunity to relearn everything and unlearn a lot. To make space for that relearning. But and part of that was, you mentioned kind of sexuality and identity, and that's kind of where some of my journey started, was exploring sexuality as a way to better understand your own identity. And I think it can be a really, really powerful tool for that. So I think a lot of people come to BBXX for that. And then, we like to just leave the door a crack open, and they're like, oh yeah, I'm just here. We're learning about sex and sexuality. And we say, oh no, come on in. Like, sure. And then we're like, hear all these things about vulnerability and communication and intimacy and connection, and, take them down a rabbit hole. But
nice.
I think it's an incredible place for people to start their journey is understanding yourself and your own identity through this lens of sexuality and this relationship too that we touched on earlier. And I've been researching, and so I'm going to bring more to the table at our event, but this relationship between creativity and sexuality, that's really fascinating.
Yeah. And I think creativity is just a form of communication, really, with yourself, which again we don't do often enough. And that's what I'm hoping will come out of this. Like, should I say? But the sculpting tutorial we're going to do, the sculpting workshop, is all about that.
Yeah.
What art forms do you like? Like, are you a creative person in other ways?
Well, it's interesting, how you define, because I know people say, oh, I'm creative or I'm not. I'm definitely the most creative out of my family, because certain people in my family would be like, oh, I'm not creative. But it depends. You can be creative in the way you live your life or in a certain art form. I love that you said creativity is communication with yourself. I actually just started reading only the first chapter of The Artist's Way, and it's a lot about how kind of it's with your relationship with yourself. And what I love to think in general is that, when people come to BBXX to learn about relationships, for example, or, in learning about creativity, that it's not learning a new skill. It's uncovering something that is human, that we're born with, that we have within us, but that we're disconnected from.
Yeah.
And it's reconnecting ourselves and diving deeper and like enhancing, embracing and enhancing, expanding that part. And, through tapping into it, obviously it becomes much bigger and you can hone that skill. But rather than people thinking, oh, I'm not good at relationships or being creative, it's like, no, just life gets in the way and there's so much noise, and you have to get all the obstacles out of the way that are keeping us from being in touch with that part of ourselves that is human and natural and part of us.
Yeah.
So I would consider myself a creative person. I was actually worked as a photographer before BBXX. I worked in digital media production, and I do love creativity, but life does get in the way, and it's hard if you don't make, at least for me, and I think this is the same for a lot of people, you have to make space for it. Just like your relationships. If you go about your life busy and you're not cutting out time to spend with somebody and to have intimate moments and to have deep conversations and, creating the circumstances that allow for that to happen, like, your relationship is going to be a lot harder, or you're not going to be able to tap into your creativity if you're not setting aside the time, creating the circumstances, and mostly just getting rid of all the obstacles. It's not about what you need to do. It's just about the things that you need to stop doing to allow for that to happen.
Bit of self-reflection. And I think there's also a challenge, like, once you do get into that, if you make time to be creative, even if you're already in the creative industry, let's say, but we set very high standards for ourselves, and I think we lose sight of the purpose of creativity.
Yeah.
And so much of it can be around, oh, it's not good enough, it didn't come out how I want it to look, I'm not a professional ceramicist or whatever. But that again is such a shame, because you're missing the point. You're missing the point. Like, it's really, like, it's so insightful, and that's valuable in itself.
No, 100%. And I mean, about the process, not the outcome. I'm all about, intentions over expectations. People might hear me talk about this all the time. It's like one of my life mottos is, if you're judging things based on the outcome or going into them with expectations, expectations are outcome focused. So if I get into a relationship or start a project and have this clear idea of what it's going to look like, exactly what it's going to be worth, how it's going to turn out, or getting into a relationship, what will happen, A, B, C, D, you don't have control over that other person. You don't have control over if there's a global pandemic, you lose a certain opportunity or things change, whatever it is. What you do have control over is the process and how you go into it. And so if you have intentions going into it to challenge yourself, to learn, to grow, to be open, to, you know, not focus on the details, to try and be present, that's what you can control. And that's what's more valuable in the end, because we look at, if a whole journey is from here to here, you know, we only look at this one tiny, tiny point. And one, you'll never make it there without this journey. That's how important that journey is.
Yeah.
And you're ignoring the vast majority, the 99.9% that got you there. And that in the end, you know, was more important. But sadly, we're not taught to think of it in that way. But yeah, creativity being that same thing, and being, you know, process focused. And even if the outcome isn't getting you to where you want to go, you might be growing, and you as a person and as a creator might be getting closer to where you want to be going.
It's a learning experience, and even failures or whatever, these are as valuable. So
I love failure.
Even more so.
It's one of my favorite topics. It's so important. And it's that same thing, right? Like, it is, you literally cannot have success. You know, we could get into how we define that without failure. They are vital, essential, foundational building blocks of success. And nobody has ever been successful. And kind of the bigger you want to succeed, the harder you have to fail along the way, essentially. And again, reframing, you know, what creativity is, or what the outcome is, or what success looks like. I myself, you know, have had to work very hard on doing this. And one of the biggest aha moments perhaps I've ever had was this one time when somebody asked me, you know, what % of the time do you feel successful? And I said, I don't know, you know, maybe like 20% of the time I feel successful, and 80% of the time I feel like a failure.
Yeah.
And I said, but what's your definition of success? I love operational definitions. You know, we can all be having think we're having the same conversation and talking about two totally different concepts. And they said to me, my definition of success is being content with the amount of progress you're making in the direction you want to be going.
Oof, so good.
Cue brain explosion. I was just like, what? Why has nobody ever taught me this before? My life would be so different. My opinion of myself, my view of the world would be so different. And those numbers instantly would be flipped. You know, 80% of the time feel successful by that definition, and maybe 20% of the time not. And so, you know, reframing, and that's what I think is so interesting, is people don't realize that it's not, you have to make all these big changes. Sometimes some of the biggest changes can come from a tiny mindset shift. And being part of this conversation, having this exposure to this topic and what Gashtrays is doing, you know, sometimes huge changes can come from seemingly small things that have this, you know, compounding ripple effect and create something so much bigger. And it's that shift in that perspective.
Yeah, completely. I'm on board.
So when you were talking about kind of your creative process and how you make some of these things, I would love to have you tell us a bit about, you know, how the workshop works, what people do, and what some of these points in the workshop where people tend to have these mindset shifts, and what some of, you know, the most valuable, you know, testimonials or comments people have made to you have been.
So should I just
I think there's a tile behind you.
Well spotted.
Is that? Yes. Oh, are there two? Oh yeah, you've got another one over there. So this, yes, we've got a vulva tile.
And we've got
beautiful.
Really one on the wall.
We've got a willy tile, a penis tile with some beautiful necklaces hanging on it. I love how they're perfect for jewelry.
Yeah, I love this guy. I don't think I'm going to sell him. I'm attached to him now. But there you go.
There we go.
Veins and all. But yeah, so in the workshop we're going to be a self-portrait tile making workshop. So whatever genitals you have, we're going to be teaching you sculpting techniques on how to represent yourself in clay, your genitals in clay. And so yeah, it's going to be open dialogue throughout. We're just going to be discussing anatomy and our feelings towards our genitals, and like, when did we first look at them, that kind of thing. But I guess it's a slow process. It's a very like calming process. It's very like focused, and I think that in itself is I think it's a really healthy process, because essentially you have to look at your genitals. You could take a picture or look in a mirror, and from my personal experience and from other people telling me, the act of like intricately looking at your genitals and spending, it could be upwards of an hour sculpting them if you wanted to, and focusing on each individual line and crease and wrinkle and hair, that act is just so effective in disarming your insecurities, because it's just you just become so, it loses all meaning. Like the image loses all meaning. No longer is this your genitals that carries, it can carry history, it can carry trauma, like now it's just like an image in front of you, and you're just following the lines, and you become so comfortable with it. Like we did a similar workshop a few years ago, and this was pre-COVID, so it was beautiful. A room of 20 people all just sculpting their vulvas together, and everyone went to the toilet, looked in the mirror, took a photo, and by the time we were like sculpting away together, we'd all got into the flow of it. People completely forgot, and they had their phones on the table with their pictures of their vulvas, just everybody out there, and people were looking at each other and go, oh, that's a lovely little, that's so nice, it's so pretty, and just be like, oh, yours is cute. And just the atmosphere was so beautiful and so uplifting. And yeah, it's just it's just becoming more at peace with it, really, and just more aware of it. Yeah, I personally really rate it, because even I've done a few portraits of myself in the past, and I've done it, and it's been like a long process, and the act has been so therapeutic. And then I've come away and I'm like, oh, it actually looks nothing like me. But and in some ways I don't, it doesn't feel very representative. I don't like the look of the sculpture, but the act of it, of just staring at yourself for that long, is just so calming.
That room sounds magical, and
it was beautiful.
Like normalizing
that's
it. And again, that kind of openness and acceptance, and taking something, as we talked about earlier, kind of, and making it, acknowledging this is ordinary, in the sense of half the world has this body part. This is the most, ordinary, normal, healthy human thing. And so being able to look at it almost as this separating ourselves emotionally from it, and getting rid of that noise, like we were talking about before. Life gets in the way, the noise, culture, the messages we hear get in the way. Getting rid of that, and just kind of objectively looking at ourselves in this way, where we can create that acceptance, or almost forget that it's a part of us, in order to tap back into it, as if we were looking at somebody else, and often we're, more accepting of other people than we are of ourselves. And so looking at it in this way, is this ordinary thing, yet again, like we talked about before, it's art, we're celebrating, it's beautiful, creating something extraordinary, and in the fact that it is so unique. Yes, everybody has one, but we have our own fingerprint, and we are completely unique. And so tapping into, I feel like we live in this in between unhealthy place. And so tapping into those two sides of the spectrum, of like the ordinary and the extraordinary, and bringing them together to totally reshape. I love this idea of reshaping the clay, and reshaping our concepts of ourselves, our body image, and, our sexuality and self-esteem.
Yes, you're a poet, by the way. Yeah, it's a shame because our genitals are so like crowded in stigma and insecurity, and I think because of that, oh sorry, there you
Oh,
go.
it cut out a bit.
So because of that shame and insecurity, we just tend to avoid them. We tend to not look at them.
Yeah.
Pretend it's not there, and that's just going to perpetuate it, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, just take a long, hard look in the mirror.
It almost seems as though we're keeping ourselves from a deeper relationship with ourselves through that, you know, understanding. First of all, you know, if you've never looked at yourself, if you don't even know what you look like. So that awareness, which, you know, can lead to acceptance. And so through that deeper intimacy with ourselves, that is, again, the vital ingredient at BBXX. We always talk about how in the end, it's really about that relationship with yourself first. You can only go as deep with other people as you can with ourselves. So if we're keeping ourselves from deeper intimacy, you know, then we're also keeping ourselves from deeper intimacy with everyone else.
Yeah, completely.
And so tapping into this space with ourselves, I think, is an incredible tool. And this is more some of the research that I'll talk about at the event, but how art can be this therapeutic tool and in a really unique way allow for some of these things. You talked about how kind of you lose yourself in it when we're talking, you have to think and you can't always find the words. When you don't have to, you know, find the words. One, they talk about how in art therapy, sometimes we're not willing to admit to ourselves or out loud. It might sound silly if we're insecure about, you know, our fingernails or belly button or some random part of our body or whatever it is. We might not be willing to admit it or say it out loud. And so art allows us to kind of express those feelings in a nonverbal way. And also, I think, process and recreate that relationship we have with that body part, for example, and you know, again, reshaping not just what you're creating, but what's in your mind. And as you said, kind of losing yourself in that process and coming out with that different perspective and relationship with ourselves. I think art in that way is a very unique and powerful tool to tap into.
Because at the end of it, you get to hang it on a wall and you get to look at it.
That's the best part. And you get to start the conversation with everybody. Yeah. That is the most important part. You know, we sell these amazing necklaces. They're beautiful necklaces. They're Crave Vesper necklaces. And they're also vibrators. Very great vibrator. If anybody's interested, let us know and we'll hook you up. And you know, it's incredible when you wear that around. People always ask, is that a pipe? What is that? Is it like a whistle? Do you keep drugs in there? What is it? And then it's this opportunity. You can either say, oh yeah, it's a necklace, or, you know, whatever. You don't have to tell people what it is. But when you do, it starts this whole conversation. And the number of people who just as a result of wearing that necklace have opened up to me about different things and told me their stories, just because having that there is this symbol that I am here to create this environment where, you know, it is accepting, you are welcome, whatever your experience is. You know, it's just this symbol that clears that space and clears the air for people to be able to share their stories and feel comfortable joining this conversation. And so I love this symbol of not only do you get to do this workshop, totally transform your relationship with your body and your, you know, body and mind connection, then you get to walk away with something, a piece of art that celebrates it, and you can go hang it on your wall. And every time people come over, you have this amazing conversation starter to really reinforce the entire beautiful cycle.
Yeah, completely. It's fascinating. Like my dream is to really have these conversations with people outside of the wonderful echo chamber that we're in. But you know, they're almost more in need of the conversation than the people who are already with us. And I was just thinking, it just reminded me of I'm every now and then I do a bit of freelance design for this agency, and it's not my usual crowd. You know, I go in, it's a bunch of men and middle-aged men. You know, I don't bump into many where I am, and they're all very like uptight designer crew, you know, myself included, and they're very intimidated by Gashtrays, and I can see every time that it's brought, they'll be like, "So how's work going?" They won't say the word Gashtrays. I'll be like, "Oh, it's really good." And I'll tell them a bit about it, and every time I can see that it's like cool, and they'll just kind of be a bit shady and like, and then one time they were like, "So what are you up to at the moment?" I was like, "Oh, I'm writing a piece on FGM." And I was like, okay, and like shadily looking away, not really engaging. And then one of them, bless them, was like, "What's FGM?" And it sparked this conversation that they would have never had otherwise. And we had this 40-minute conversation about female genital mutilation, and they got so interested, and I can see that it was a lot for them to like break out of it and talk about it. But yeah, it's that thing, like having that spark, that conversation is just
exactly.
so
You
good.
just need a spark and you can start a fire.
Everyone's interested.
Exactly. And the number of times, you know, that I have talked to like older men, older women, but specifically, you know, men in their 70s, 80s, about BBXX, about sexuality, you know, those are sometimes the people most interested in, sometimes, you know, unexpected, most, you know, accepting and open to like, oh my God, me and my wife, this and that, or, you know, just, this is a global thing. This is so human. These are conversations people all over the world are waiting to have, and just, you know, but waiting for the okay to have them. And this being that symbol that opens that space and lets them know that it is okay, and is that, you know, invitation. But exactly, you don't know who it's going to be, what they're going to look like. Everybody can relate to this. It's the most human thing out there.
Completely.
And so I love, you know, creating this symbol and giving people the opportunity to, you know, with their own hands, create themselves and create their own symbol to invite others to join this conversation and turn that spark into a fire.
Nice. I can't wait.
Well, I can't wait. So everybody who's tuning in, we're going to be launching this event, tickets going on sale for our self-sculpting. You can sculpt yourself if you want, you know, a partner, but really leaning into that process of reflecting on yourself literally and figuratively, and using this opportunity to, you know, take this clay and create, you know, this, there we go, this beautiful tile. Create yourself and, you know, normalize, explore yourself, reflect on your relationship with your own body, what's getting in the way of that, and create these beautiful, beautiful works of art. Yay!
Yay!
Well, everybody stay tuned. We're about to launch sales for tickets, so be on the lookout. Follow BBXX, follow Gashtrays, and the event will be May 1st, Saturday, May 1st at 11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, 7 p.m. UK time. And, you know, it'll probably be the most fun you've had on a Saturday this whole pandemic. Let's be real. Make it a brunch thing, get friends together, have a group. You know, on Saturday, make it a party. Saturday night in the UK, make it a party. And join us on May 1st, BBXX and Gashtrays, for exploring sexuality and creativity through our workshop, Sex Ed and Ceramics. Yay! Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining me today to share some of your story. And I can't wait.
Great.
Looking forward to it. See you soon.
Bye.
Mwah.
Bye.